Some of these buildings in the original Operation Flashpoint Cold War crisis weren't enterable. And before the release of the first public demo of Cold War Crisis, there was it was kind of up in the air about how forests would work, because at the time in games you either had like a tree here and a tree there, not even as thick as these trees on the right here, or you would have a wall with a forest texture on it. So initially Bohemia Interactive told us English-speaking fans that what they were going to have was a forest that you could go about 50 meters deep into, and then you would hit a textured forest wall. But then that would mean that you couldn't actually navigate through a forest, because the core of the forest would essentially be an obstacle. So we kind of said, well, you know, that's disappointing, but it's still, you know, pretty cool. We understand, you know, systems can only handle so much. So I'll show you what they did. if we can even see it. Excuse me. And they did such a good job of this that I think they may have explained this to us initially, how they did this, but then I just forgot because the solution works so well. In fact, they may have actually increased the number of polys on these trees. Well, maybe not. So if you look at the top, it seems like it's almost a square, but maybe it is a triangle. But initially, I think they told us that what they did was that they made the trunk of the tree a three-sided, I don't want to say cylinder. Yeah, see, this has more polys than a triangle. So they may have increased the number of polys in the trees, but I thought initially it was a triangle. Anyway, so then they used a texture to make it look round, and because it's just a vertical object, you can't really see that it's like a beam or a plank. It looks like a round tree. You have to actually look at the bottom to see that it's not round. So that was how they created a fully rendered forests. That's still, you know, kind of a lot of polys even for 2001. But anyway, so we were like disappointed at the news that, you know, it would only be 50 meters deep. And this was about the time that I asked for a side door machine gun on the Blackhawk. And you had like one fan who was like constantly moaning, you know, stop asking for features because they'll never get this game released. And essentially he was worried that we were feature creeping the game. Anyway, so Bohemia, let me get out again. So, I don't know, it might have been like a week later, maybe 2 weeks, I don't know. It was a short time, and Bohemia Interactive comes back to us and tells us that they've now got fully rendered forests in the game, and we just went about out of our minds. And the first time I played a multiplayer game of Cold War Crisis, I used, you know, my land nav skills to cut right through a forest and get to the objective, and then put some law rockets into enemy BMPs. At the same time, and this is one of my complaints about gamers, is you had gamers complaining that they didn't have vehicles to, you know, use as a limousine to get to the objective. That, oh my gosh, they were going to have to walk or run like 1 or 2 kilometers. And, you know, like 2 kilometers, what's that, about a mile? And, you know, that was a real eye roll moment for me. That not only were gamers like too lazy to walk in real life, but then they were too lazy to walk in a frickin' video game. This Jeep's a bit gutless. So even then, some of these bushes were real good for concealment. You could get inside a bush and get pretty lost in there. I don't know what's going on with reverse. Excuse me. So this is Durras, such that it was then. Like, those buildings aren't enterable. This shed is. You had like these incomplete fences, but some really run-down looking buildings. But the game used these photorealistic, at the time, you know, considered photorealistic textures that they took from pictures. I believe that they took of real buildings in the Czech Republic. So that's Durras, and here we have Vernon. Some of these courtyard doors, some of these courtyard doors would open and some wouldn't. Yeah, those won't open. So that building's not enterable. That's not enterable. Those two aren't. This one is. This one is, I think, right? It's a window, isn't it? Yeah. And those two are. And that one's not. So a lot of times if you're placing enemy AI units, you're just placing them in these yards, and then the buildings are acting as like just cover, really. But just like last night, you'd get a lot of people that would go into the tree line and you know, they'd try to scope out the towns from the tree line, because apart from getting right into the town, the terrain was kind of bare. But, I mean, still had more concealment and cover than your typical tactical shooter. I mean, this came out shortly before Battlefield 1942, if I remember correctly. And Battlefield 1942 had these small maps. This game had unique 12-kilometer by 12-kilometer islands. Cold War Crisis had 3 of them. And then Operation Flashpoint Resistance added Nagova. Excuse me. Cold War Crisis had 4 of them because it also had the Desert Isle. So, yeah, Resistance added Nagova, which was one of the most diverse of the islands. And here we have Saint Pierre. And this town was one of the more elaborate ones. One of the final scenes of the Cold War Crisis campaign happens inside this tavern, pub, whatever. Forgive my driving, it's kind of hard to control because like I can't get the mouse sensitivity as low as I want it. And that's Saint Pierre. So you didn't have, you know, all the piers and docks and everything. But, so I forget if this is where the castle is or not. What I like about the compass in Cold War Crisis is that you're looking straight down at it, so the tick mark is lined up. You're not looking at the tick mark from an oblique angle. I don't know why they did that in Reforger. It's kind of whack. Unless I'm missing something. So, this is the castle as it was then. And even then, the moon had phases in the game, and it had a real star map, which they boasted you could navigate by the northern star in the game. I don't remember ever having to do that. Anyway, so that's a look at Durras Vernon Saint Pierre as it existed in 2001. You could see it now in the title Arma Cold War Assault, because Bohemia Interactive had sold the rights to the name Operation Flashpoint to Cold War Crisis. However, Bohemia Interactive, they, I guess, owned the rights to the actual digital content of the game. So then, Codemasters, the publisher who bought the rights to the name, they went on to make their own Operation Flashpoint game, which the first one was called, I think, Dragon Rising, and the next one was like Red River or something like that. And that could have been a really good game. It could have been a lot more popular than it was, but for some reason there was like no multiplayer server support, and Codemasters didn't seem to really be doing much to build up the multiplayer community, which was, I mean, it was nuts, because the game looked great. CQB in Operation Flashpoint Dragon Rising was better than it was in Cold War Crisis or Resistance. So it could have made a much bigger splash than it did. But Codemasters, I don't know, man, they just didn't support or market the game the way they should have, I guess. And they kind of pulled the same stunt when they released this game, or actually Operation Flashpoint Resistance. They released it for the classic old black Xbox under the title Operation Flashpoint Elite. And Operation Flashpoint Elite had something that, let me get out of here. Operation Flashpoint Elite had something that Cold War Crisis and Resistance did not have, which was mid-game joining. These two titles had a multiplayer lobby system that was kind of like Rainbow Six or Rogue Spear, where you had a lobby and everybody that was going to be in the match formed up in the lobby, and then the game started, but nobody could join once the game started. So if you lost connection, which you did quite a bit in this game, you had no ability to get back into the game that was in progress. And if you had any latecomers, they were just SOL. So someone would have to back out to the lobby in order to let latecomers or anybody who died back into the game, but then you would also have to restart the scenario. So that was pretty lame. Now note that I have my view distance cranked up quite a bit, and I can do that on the system I have now, but if I had tried this on the systems that I was running back in the early 2000s, the frame rate would have become a slideshow. So, and what's nice about having a nice long view distance in this game is if you're piloting, especially like the A10, you want to be able to look around. You don't want to be flying into a wall of fog that's only 300 meters off the nose of your aircraft. Anyway, getting back to it, Operation Flashpoint Elite would allow you to join a game in progress. And Bohemia Interactive kept telling us that it wasn't possible to do that in Cold War Crisis or Resistance because, like, I don't know, like the code was the code was too set in stone, or they couldn't, reverse engineer it back that far, or I don't know. But in Elite, you could do that. And what that meant was that this game on the classic Xbox was some of the best multiplayer I had ever experienced in Operation Flashpoint. So, and that came out in about 2005 or 2006. So about 4 years after this title came out. And it was glorious because the gaming community on the classic Xbox was a lot more diverse. So you'd get like a full squad of guys, and you would hear Latinos, you would hear brothers, you would hear white guys, you'd hear Southern Hicks, city guys, you'd hear the whole range. And so it was just like being in the real army. Because when I went into the army, like I'm pulling guard duty, guarding snow in Alaska, in just some road out in the boonies somewhere that doesn't seem to be of any significance. And meanwhile, everybody's getting warm in the tent if they're not pulling the actual guard shift. And you had, surfers, stoners, motorheads, jocks, nerds, you had all the cliques, and everybody's in the tent, and we're all basically the same rank, and we're all in the same crap together, and it was like a utopia, man. And it's like no, we weren't a certain color, we were all green. Now, I've since learned that lots of the African American soldiers in my unit felt like they were getting screwed over in various ways that I was not aware of at the time, and I certainly wasn't the guy that was getting promoted ahead of his peers. So it's not like I was taking anything from anybody. In fact, my platoon sergeant was an African American. I think he was either Bahamian or Jamaican. I think he was Bahamian originally, and I don't think he liked me, and maybe that's just a common experience, for privates at their first duty station. But like, he would put me out on a guard point, like at the beginning at sundown, and he would tell me to stay there until I was relieved, and then relief would never come. He did that to me at least twice. So it seemed, yeah, and this is in Alaska, so it would get cold at night. So otherwise, I can't really remember anything else he did to me that was all that bad. And who knows, maybe he did the same thing to the other guys, because it wasn't every day that I was pulling guard when we were on field exercise. But getting back to Operation Flashpoint Elite, the diverse makeup of the squads you had in Xbox multiplayer, and the fact that you could rejoin the game, just made for some of the best ops. And I hadn't really experienced anything quite like that until last night at the FTX with you guys. So I want to thank you for that. Beholding your organization is truly a wonder, because you're adding so much to the game, to the experience that's not actually in the game. You're bringing it to the game, and you're making the experience even more authentic, and it's just amazing to behold.